Hi, my name is Gina Friedman Armstrong, and I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of Pivoting, a One Cancer Place conversation where we'll be sharing the personal moments that turn a cancer diagnosis into an experience of growth and finding purpose. Through the Pivoting program, we're talking with people who've been through it to learn what's helped them along the way and how to turn a difficult experience into an opportunity for growth. Before we get started, we'd like to thank Guardant Health for their generous support of this program and for making these conversations possible. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Amy Grove, a non-small cell lung cancer survivor and patient advocate. Amy's journey is an inspiring example of how, even in the hardest moments, there's a path forward. Amy, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us. If you would like to tell us how you were first diagnosed and what you felt about that, that would be great.
Sure. Well, back in November of 2018, I had a flu shot. About 2 weeks after the flu shot, I noticed that I had a lymph node that had come out, or if you want to just say a bump on the side of my neck in a weird spot. Well, it didn't go away after a month. So I went to my primary care doctor, who turned around and did a CT scan of just like my head to about the top of my lungs. In the meantime, or during that time, she had called me and said that the CT scan did indeed show something in my lung. They didn't know what it was, but there was something in my lung. At that point, we went ahead and did a core needle biopsy on the lymph node in my neck. And it turned out that it was definitely non-small cell lung cancer. So at that point, we decided to do a PET scan, which showed it was all over. I didn't get the true stage 4 diagnosis until December 18th of 2018. How'd I feel? I was very shocked. I was upset, cried, told my family. We all cried a little bit. But at this point, I just wanted to know how to get rid of it. So being stage 4, I was immediately told that I was palliative. There was no cure. So I just wanted to live a little longer. So we started on immunotherapy. Now, I took immunotherapy for 3 months, and it caused hyperprogression. So I had it everywhere from my toes, the top of my skull, my shoulders, my lymph nodes, my adrenal glands, my ovaries, my pelvis, my hips, some of my ribs, and my femur. In that time, due to the metastasized cancer, broke my femur, couldn't get any operation on it until 3 weeks because I was in the middle of radiation. During that time, I just pretty much, I was in a wheelchair, couldn't do much for myself. I had lost tons of weight. And to be honest, I was starting to give up. My doctor didn't let me know that I was really in bad shape, but I knew I was bad shape. So he decided to do biomarker testing, which took about 6 to 8 weeks to get it back then. And when we did, I was surprised because I have squamous non-small cell lung cancer, which is very rare to have a targetable biomarker on that. Luckily, I did, known as MET amplification. So I started on a targeted therapy. Within 2 weeks of starting this targeted therapy, which was in April of 2019, I was up out of the wheelchair, moving around like normal, like I wasn't sick anymore, just all of a sudden out of the blue. So I chalked that up to my miracle drug. But I would have to say at that point is when I realized I was actually going to live longer than I originally thought. My whole thought process changed.
At what point did you seek out help from groups to get support, or did you do it on your own? Tell us about that?
Well, I remember when I was diagnosed, I asked my oncologist if there was any support groups in person. Now, at the time, we were almost to the COVID problem. So, but he said that even without the COVID issue, there were no in-person lung cancer support groups. He said there's plenty of breast cancer and there's plenty of general, but there's no lung cancer. And I remember just being completely shocked and pretty upset because people don't tend to understand when you have cancer how much it changes your life. Unless you've been through it, you just don't know it. You need to talk to people that are going through the same thing. So I didn't start looking for support until I started on the targeted therapy, because when I was on the immunotherapy, I was so ill. Support was not something really that was on my mind. Oddly enough, I didn't need as much support for myself as I noticed other people needed it. So I don't know why that is. I didn't have very many questions, I guess, because I felt lucky, but I felt better helping others, and that helped me get through any problems I had.
How did you find those support groups?
I was just searching lung cancer support groups, and I noticed that there was a lot of charities. And then somehow I rolled over to Facebook and started looking, and had no problem finding the support groups there that I fit into. I'm not really a chatty person. I felt more comfortable with answering people's posts rather than chatting. So that's why I like the Facebook platform.
So through those platforms, did you find a lot of knowledge coming from those, where other people were answering questions too? Did that help you?
Oh yes, that helped me a lot. You also, it gave you a lot of hope, because there were a lot of people on there that had been living for many years and were doing very well, working, doing everything, didn't look sick, the famous words, didn't look sick. And it gave me so much hope to just keep going. And I felt like I needed to do that for others.
How did gaining knowledge about the cancer and your treatment options influence your outlook on your condition?
I felt like I finally had control. Like I was able to say, at least I've got another drug if this one doesn't work. I've got clinical trials if that doesn't work. I've got a plan that could potentially lead me out a couple of years. So it was more of I felt powerful. I could bring in things to my doctor who maybe he didn't know, he didn't understand, or hadn't heard about it. And he could educate me. So yeah, it was more of a control and powerful type of thing.
So were you were finding those treatment options and things like that your doctor wasn't necessarily bringing to your attention? You were finding those through the groups, or where were you finding your information?
A lot through the groups, from people who have been going through it. Oddly enough, because I'm squamous, there's not very many drugs, especially squamous with a biomarker. So I had to have that discussion with the doctor to understand that what might work for adenocarcinoma MET biomarker may not work for squamous. So we have to discuss on, would you try it? Would this work better? It's good to have that conversation with your doctor to figure out what your next move is.
What do you think was your pivotal moment in your cancer journey?
When I didn't die in April of 2019. That was the pivotal moment. I've never been really much of a miracle believer or anything like that. And I really didn't think that the pill that he gave me was really going to work, because I was in that much bad shape. And then it did. And all of a sudden I feel like I've got to give back to the world somehow. So being outspoken about my um, journey has helped. I hope to help others by knowing it's not an immediate death sentence.
Were you working prior to your diagnosis?
Yes, but I had only been there for 6 months. So I was there 5 months when the lymph node popped out of my neck. Um, had just been diagnosed, started on Keytruda, couldn't get up to the steps in my office. Well, unfortunately, I was there too short. I didn't have short-term disability, and I didn't have enough money to buy long-term disability, and I couldn't do FMLA because I hadn't been there long. So I immediately got laid off. It got worse 6 months later, June of 2019. I had was feeling so much better. The drug was working, and then my husband lost his job. So the financial stuff in the beginning was not so much of a problem. We had really good insurance. I was able to get on disability, so I was able to start getting that money in to help. And unfortunately, we had to bust into our 401ks to get us through to survive. Because unfortunately, here we are 5.5 years later, neither one of us have a job. So we're still having complications from that.
So you started working in patient advocacy, correct?
It was helping others is the biggest thing. I had actually had business cards made up to give to my doctor, to give to people that are newly diagnosed, because I don't want anybody to feel alone how I felt when I was diagnosed. And then of course doing the asking for more funding is included in that patient advocacy. So I go to Washington, D.C. and tell my story to my representatives to hopefully help us get more funding for lung cancer. So going and helping others and listening to their stories and helping them realize that they're not alone is probably the most important thing I've ever done in my life.
And do you think you would be involved in something like that had you not had a cancer diagnosis?
No, my job normally is in maintenance. So I'm like a facilities coordinator or a maintenance planner. So that had nothing to do with health at all. So I honestly, I don't think that I would have been a patient advocate or support at all. The best thing I ever did. The whole learning about what I've got really makes you understand, and even the science that you can understand, you're able to put together. So you're learning at the same time, as well as being able to tell others what those papers mean. Any journal research, we can explain it, hopefully getting to the point where it's like plain language, to have everybody understand it rather than just doctors and researchers and scientists.
Can you recall a moment when something you learned led to a significant breakthrough or realization about your health and your healthcare?
In August of 2019, I had been taking my targeted therapy for about 3 months at this point. So the doctor decided to do a PET scan. Um, and it came back that I was 85% resolved. So in 3 months, I went from being deathly ill to 85% clear of stage 4 lung cancer. Um, and of course, it only got better because 3 months after that, which would have been in November of 2019, I was 95% clear. So it's a wonderful feeling to know that you're pretty much clear. They won't tell you Ned. At least my doctor won't. He won't. He refuses to use that. So we always say stable, which
Okay.
stable is good.
How did your sense of purpose and self-confidence evolve as you became more knowledgeable about your situation?
Well, I have social anxiety. So when I first started doing this, I would sign up for interviews and, stories to be told in front of people. And I thought, this is awful. I can't get through this. I mean, I would be in tears. Um, couldn't remember what I was talking about. Well, since I've since changed, so I'm doing a lot better now. I still can't stand up in front of a lot of people and talk about the story, but I still can do one-on-one usually pretty well. So between that and knowing that I have other drugs that are out there available to me and clinical trials, makes you know that you've got more life to you. So the confidence level of living each year grows more and more.
Um, at what point did you learn about biomarkers and did you ever learn about like what reading your pathology report and things like that?
Yeah, my doctor sort of explained it to me, but I immediately went home and had to look it up on the internet. Of course, I started to understand what the different biomarkers were, and then found biomarker specific support groups. So that helped as well.
So you never went through any kind of education classes or anything regarding biomarkers?
No, no, just
Mhm.
learned on the fly.
Mhm.
There's a lot of information out there, and a lot of the organizations have really good, I guess you could say training. They're not really training, it's just breakdown of things, and it's easily understood by the average person that has no medical background.
Going through this, did you feel like your doctor was doing shared decision making with you where you felt like you could talk to him on that same level because you had more you'd been gaining more knowledge and understand what he was talking about?
Yeah, and especially because I would ask him questions. So he'd say something, I'd say, "Well, what's that mean? What's that have to do with me?" Or so he knew I was really interested in learning what everything meant. And so right off the bat, when I was talking to him when I was first diagnosed, he said, "You have a choice. You can do immunotherapy, which we already know how that works, or you can do this clinical trial."
Mhm.
Well, I didn't know anything at that point. I was just scared. I said, I'm going with immunotherapy because we already know what's going on there. But as soon as I learned about the clinical trial, I called a family member of mine who has multiple myeloma. And she has been on a clinical trial for 10 years, and the drug is working perfectly. So we went through the pros and cons of that. And that's when I determined that going with the immunotherapy would have been my best choice at that moment. The doctor understood. I explained it all to him, and we have a really good working relationship. I know there are people out there that are afraid to look into it because the first thing they think is if you go on Google, the lifespan for stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer is dismal. But they really say the more you know, the better off you are. And and I'm a true proponent of that. But also know that you're not alone. There are people out here who'd be willing to talk to you at any stage of your cancer journey. Um, and you're not alone.
Have you met a lot of people along the way who you've kind of become friends with because of this?
Oh yes, and it's so rewarding to meet people that you've been talking to on Facebook for years, and you're like, wow, it's like we've been friends for forever. And talking on the phone with them, crying with them when you have to. You don't want to say that cancer can be a good thing, but in some cases it can, and I believe this actually made a huge difference in me as a person. So I feel blessed to have gotten cancer.
Do you feel like if your mindset had been different, if you had stayed in that frozen state or in a state of um thinking you wouldn't make it, do you think you would have had as good of an outcome?
You just felt better physically, which helped mentally. So, and but at that point, you had to decide what you were going to do. Yeah, at least I felt like I had to give back in some way. Um, and to let people know that there's plenty of hope out there.
Mm. Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your story. This has been a great conversation to have with you, and so happy for you that everything is going great, and looking forward to hearing more from you in the future.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed this. It was fun. And I'm getting over that social anxiety, feeling good.
Thanks so much, Amy.
Thank you.